another episode of E-Man Codes. Making sure that I'm actually recording this. So this is the second tutorial of the Flask project that we were doing. I've linked below the first video, part 1. So this is part 2. So from the previous part, if you did the previous part, then you'll know that you've done your git clone. You can see here that you've got your app.py, you've got your application directory, you've got your create.py directory also, and you've got your requirement.txt, which contains nothing at the moment, but really and truly should contain a Flask. Yeah. So the first thing we're going to do, right, we're going to just make sure before we start actually building this project, we're going to make sure that it works, that everything that we've downloaded out, every environment that we've downloaded, it works. Make sure that you've got your environment variable activated. I showed that in my last videos. Have a look there. So the first thing you can do is just do a Python 3 app.py, and it should come up with nothing because we've not filled it with anything. We've not filled it what you do when you do Python, when you execute the app.py script. So with this Python 3 app.py, make sure you're using Python 3 as the Python version that you're using. If not, it will be different. It might not work. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to populate our app.py with scripts. The first thing we're going to do is from application, import app. The reason for this here is because we're going to first access our application. We're going to look within our application folder, and there's an init file in there that we're going to reference. And then we're going to have a given if statement. So if name equals double equals in Python means equivalent to. So if the name that it's passed in is equivalent to main, and what we wanted to do, we wanted to app.run, so activate the app function and then activate the run function. And then the debug, we want it to be able to tell us if there's an error. So we do debug equals true. We save that and then we'll close that. And the next thing we want to do, we want to access our init file. So once we access our once we do Python app.py, Python 3 app.py, it will literally look into this application and tell it, okay, cool. It needs to go, make sure your spelling is actually correct because that's why it's quite important. It needs to go into the application directory and then access app.py. And within our application directory, our init file is quite important. That's when we're going to reference it. So here we're going to say from Flask, which is the package that we're using, import capital letter Flask. This is quite important. Make sure you've got your capitals sorted, else it won't work. And then we're going to give it, so the app is going to run is going to go app Flask, and then here's where it will pass in the name. We'll reference the name that we referenced earlier in our previous video, in our previous file, and then we're going to say from application import route. So once, make sure this part of the code from application import route is at the bottom of all the script that you write, because that's the last bit that will execute and tell it that the next part it needs to look into the routes.py application folder or directory. And within here, this is where we're going to tell it what to do. Essentially, we're going to tell it, okay, you need to either run this, run that. And here we will do from application.py import app. We also need to reference it here so that it knows where it's referencing from. And then we need to call app.py so that once we hit the URL, it tells the URL. I'll explain it here quickly. So once the application hits this URL, it will tell it this URL, the slash here, find the application, sorry, find the function which tells it what to do with that particular piece of information. So the request will come in and the request will hit that slash button there, and it will tell it, okay, cool, you've hit it. Go into my folder or go into my routes.py, and whichever function is underneath that route thing, execute what's underneath it. Now we're going to keep it pretty simple. We just want to check that it works. and then we're going to give it a normal write a simple Python function that tells it we just want to return a simple HTML, and you need to have it in capital. So simple HTML that tells it hello world. Close that HTML down. Always close with a slash at the beginning, and then save that. So now when we do Python 3 app.py, remember previously when we executed, nothing happened. This time it should give us this directory and tell us, okay, we've got something running here. And you can follow the link here. This is 127.0.0.1 5000. It's literally 127.0.0.1. It's localhost. So it's whatever IP address that you're using for your server, it will reference that. So that it's common for everybody. So here you are, you can see that hello world. Just to prove that it actually does work, let's say hello world, my name is Emmanuel and this is showing it works. Like that. And you can tell it's active. We'll refresh that and there we go, it works. Brilliant. So now we're gonna really get into creating some environment variables. I think these are quite important to have. So in your init folder, the environment variables that we're gonna create them just because we're now gonna try and gain a connection between our application and the database. And if you remember from what I said, we're going to be using SQL as our database. So we're gonna now work on, we're gonna, at the end of this video, we might end on this video, but in the next video, we're going to work on creating the relationship that we're literally going to connect our application to our SQL. Just make sure that we can actually write information. We can actually, for example, so essentially with the website we're doing, we're creating a book/movie application where someone can go and enter a book or enter a name of a book or a name of a movie. Essentially, once they've entered that, it will save that to a database, and it will then read that information back onto the website. And if we also create relationships between the book and the movie. So if, for example, there is a book that's made of a movie, then it will also show that as well. And they can put that up also. So we'll quickly go into our init.py and we'll set some environment variables. I think these are quite important. The first thing you want to do is do from the OS operating system import get env, and then also we want to do a quick when we will also set this in variable as well, which is the flask SQL alchemy. It's essentially kind of like the function that allows you to communicate with the database. So we will import that flask and it's called SQL alchemy. Make sure you spell that correct. You want to import SQL alchemy. Make sure you're spelling it accurately. I have to make sure I'm actually clicking from my screen here. So let me just make sure that I've spelled it SQL alchemy. Cool. Spelling mistake there, flask. And then the first one we want to do app.config, and then set the first environment variables. Environment variables are quite important. Firstly, from a safety point of view, when you set it, you don't want to hard code your information into your application. If someone was ever stumble upon your raw code and you have all these passwords there, firstly, it's bad practice within the industry. It's bad practice, but secondly, it means that they can't do anything else to your application. They can't access your database. So here we'll do app config, and then we'll set the variable SQL alchemy underscore database underscore URI. So this is what this is what the database actually needs for you to actually connect to the database. You want to do get the environment variable, and then we'll call it, for example, we'll call the environment variable book movie db URI. That's what we'll call it, for example. And then the next one, we need a secret key. A secret key is kind of like a password. You will need a secret key to actually access your database. It's a requirement just because of the fact that when you're creating new files within the database, you need to set a key in there, like a password. So app config again. There is a pattern here. You probably may notice it soon. And then once again, you set what it will call a secret key. That's actually the name that you have to give it. And then we do get env. We can call the get env there just because if you can see here, we've already imported it from our OS. And then from here we'll do secret key. And the database we'll create this last one here. Database SQL Alchemy. And then we'll import it with the app so that it knows that we're passing it the app application. So once that's all executed, it will then pass in the app application. Make sure you've actually got your spelling correct here. Just make sure I'm pretty sure there's a spelling error. Yeah, there is. Alchemy. Right, okay. You want to save that? So this is part 2. In part 3, remember I told you, so at the moment no module called SQL Alchemy is fine. We're gonna show you in part 3. I want to show you how to actually install those. You actually need to install this potentially within our requirement txt. Let me just let's solve that right now. Just going back to my reference up on the screen.